The evening at the small restaurant began like any other, with the gentle noise of plates, the soft buzz of quiet conversations, and the warm glow of hanging lights that made the place feel safer than the world outside. The air carried the mixed scents of baked bread, grilled food, and freshly brewed tea. People came here not because it was fancy, but because it felt like a second home. Regular customers knew one another, and even strangers found comfort in the peaceful setting. In the middle of all this was a young waitress who moved through the room with a calm rhythm. She was known for her polite manners, her gentle voice, and the way she always seemed to notice when someone needed something without being asked. She wasn't loud or attention-seeking. She simply did her job with quiet focus, making sure every customer felt looked after. That evening, she had already served several tables and was wiping down a counter when a small group of regulars entered. They were friendly people who often came to relax after long days. They liked to chat, tease one another, and sometimes joke with the staff. When they saw her working nearby, they smiled and greeted her, and she returned the greeting with her usual soft. One of the group members looked toward the corner of the room where an old piano sat. It had been there for years, untouched and quietly gathering dust. Most people barely noticed it anymore, and those who remembered it often assumed it was out of tune or broken. The restaurant used to have someone who played it on weekends, but that was long in the past. Now it was more of a forgotten decoration than an instrument. The regulars had joked many times about seeing someone try to play it again, but no one had ever stepped up. That night, maybe out of boredom, or maybe just to entertain themselves, one of them pointed at the piano and then looked at the waitress. "Hey, do you know anything about that old thing?" the customer asked with a playful tone. "Can you play something basic? Just a simple tune?" The question hung in the air for a moment. The waitress paused, her hands resting lightly on a tray she was carrying. She turned her head toward the piano, then back to the group. Her expression didn't change much, but her eyes showed a hint of surprise, maybe even discomfort. She wasn't the type who liked attention. In her work, she blended quietly into the background, doing what needed to be done without drawing eyes toward herself. She liked it that way. The idea of everyone watching her, even for a moment, wasn't something she felt ready for, but the customers weren't trying to embarrass her. Their tone was lighthearted, their faces relaxed. They weren't expecting anything impressive. In fact, they probably thought the request would end with a shy laugh and a "no, I can't play." They were simply trying to create a bit of fun. She took a small breath and gave them a polite smile. Though it carried a hint of nervousness, "I don't know," she said softly. "I haven't really played in a long time." "Come on," another customer encouraged. "Just a few notes. A basic tune. It'll be fun." Their voices were friendly, not demanding. The room itself seemed to wait, though most of the other diners were still busy with their meals and conversations. Only the group at the table was watching her closely. She looked at the piano again. It sat quietly, its wooden surface reflecting the warm light. Maybe she thought it wouldn't hurt to try. It didn't have to be anything big, just a few notes. Then she could return to her work, and the moment would pass. "All right," she finally said, her voice steady, even though she felt unsure. "Just a simple tune." The customers cheered lightly, not loudly enough to disturb the room, but enough to show their excitement. She set the tray down safely behind the counter and slowly walked toward the piano. Each step felt strange, as though she was stepping into a part of her life she had tried to leave behind. Other customers glanced her way, curious but not expecting much. A waitress playing the restaurant piano wasn't a normal sight, but nothing about it seemed serious. People assumed it would be a light moment, maybe even a bit of humor. When she reached the piano, she stood there for a moment, studying it. The instrument had scratches on its surface, small marks from years of use. The keys were slightly yellowed with age, and dust sat in the corners where fingers rarely reached. She lifted the wooden cover that protected the keys, revealing them fully, and gently ran her fingertips over the smooth surface. She sat down on the old bench. It creaked slightly under her weight, as if waking up from a long sleep. She wasn't sure if the piano was even in good condition. It might be out of tune, or some keys might stick. But she wasn't planning anything complicated anyway, so it didn't matter. Behind her, the customers watched with smiles. They whispered among themselves, joking that she would probably play something like a child's first lesson. The idea of a waitress suddenly performing a full piece was so far from their minds that they didn't even imagine it. She rested her hands in her lap for a moment, breathing slowly. Her heart beat a little faster than usual. She told herself it was only a simple tune, nothing more. She didn't owe anyone perfection. No one even expected it. Finally, she placed her fingers on the keys. The cool surface felt familiar, yet distant. She pressed one key gently, testing the sound. It rang out softly, slightly deeper than she remembered, but still clear enough to be recognized. She nodded to herself, reassuring her own thoughts. Then she tried a few more notes, slowly and lightly, letting her fingers adjust to the weight of the keys. The sound filled the quiet corner, but didn't draw too much attention yet. It was simple, exactly what she intended. The customers leaned forward, listening. They looked pleased, as if their small request had finally brought life to the forgotten piano. But as she played those first few simple notes, something shifted inside her. The feel of the keys, the quiet vibration of sound, the gentle response of the piano, it all stirred a part of her memory she hadn't touched in a long time. It felt like finding an old friend she never meant to lose. Her fingers moved again. Still slow, but with a bit more confidence. The customers seemed content with what they heard so far, expecting nothing more than a basic melody. She could have stopped there. She could have played a short tune and walked away. She could have returned to her quiet routine, never revealing anything more. But the moment wasn't ready to end. Inside her chest, something warm and familiar rose, something connected to the part of her life she had pushed deep down. She didn't understand it completely, but she felt it in that simple request. In those few notes, something had awakened. She didn't know yet that the next few minutes would change the entire room. She didn't know that the people watching her would soon forget their jokes and sit in complete silence. She didn't know that this small moment, born from a casual request, would become something that everyone present would remember for a very long time. All she knew, for now, was that her fingers were resting on the keys, and the music waiting inside her was no longer willing to stay silent. And so, as the room carried on with its quiet evening, the young waitress prepared to play a simple tune, unaware that nothing about what would happen next would be simple at all. The room stayed warm and calm as the young waitress sat at the old piano, her fingers lightly touching the keys. The people in the restaurant were not paying close attention yet. Most were still busy eating or talking, thinking she would simply play a few basic notes and return to her work. Nothing about the moment felt important to them, but to her, something was shifting, bit by bit. She took a slow breath, still unsure of herself. She had agreed to play only because she did not want to seem rude. She had no plan to perform anything real. She just wanted to get through the moment politely and quietly. The last thing she wanted was to draw attention to herself. But the silence around the piano felt different now. It felt expectant, even though no one realized it. Her fingers pressed a few gentle notes again. The sound was soft, almost shy, like someone knocking on a door without wanting to disturb anyone. The regular customers leaned back in their chairs, smiling a little. They were amused that she actually went along with their playful request. They waited for her to play something simple. Maybe a tune everyone learned in childhood. A melody that required almost no effort. But as she touched the keys again, the piano responded with a quiet honesty that surprised even her. It had been years since she had played anything. Years since she had felt the weight of keys under her fingers. Years since she had let herself be part of the music she once loved so deeply. At first she played softly, like she was testing the water of a cold river. But the keys felt familiar in a way she didn't expect. Even the slight unevenness of the old piano brought back memories of the instruments she used to practice on long-ago pianos that were not perfect. But still full of life, she tried another small cluster of notes. This time her fingers moved a little smoother, falling into a rhythm she didn't plan. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. The tension in her chest loosened, just enough for her to breathe more naturally. Behind her, the group of regulars exchanged glances. They weren't impressed, yet just curious. they whispered casually, trying not to be rude. Though their voices carried softly through the quiet corner, one said. "Looks like she's actually trying," another replied. "Yeah, but it'll just be something small. She said she hasn't played in years." They expected nothing more than a short moment of entertainment. To them, this was just a fun little break in their evening. But inside her, something else was happening. Her fingers began to move with a bit more purpose, almost like they were remembering something she had forgotten. A gentle path formed beneath them, shaped not by logic, but by a feeling she once knew well. Her mind argued quietly, reminding her she was in a room full of people, working a shift, not sitting alone at home. This wasn't the time to lose herself in anything, but her hands didn't agree. They continued to move lightly, exploring small stretches of melody. Each new note seemed to wake up another piece of her memory. The sound wrapped around her in a soft, familiar warmth she had pushed away for a very long time. As she played a little more, the room's noise began to shift. People who had been busy eating lifted their heads slightly. Others paused in their conversations for a moment, surprised to hear something other than the usual background. Music from the speakers. A soft stillness began spreading from the piano. Though no one recognized it yet, she kept her eyes lowered, focusing on the keys. She didn't want to look at anyone. She didn't want to see if they were watching or judging. She told herself this was still just a simple tune, nothing special, nothing serious. But beneath that thought was another one, quieter, deeper, and harder to ignore. She missed this. She missed the way music felt before life became heavy. She missed the way her fingers knew what to do even when her heart didn't. She missed the part of herself that used to believe she could make something beautiful. Her fingertips slid across a new set of notes, this time forming a pattern she did not plan at all. It wasn't complicated, but it carried a feeling that caught her off guard. She felt a small pull inside, like a soft hand reaching into her memory and guiding her forward. She blinked and paused for just a moment. But stopping felt wrong, like taking a breath in the middle of a sentence. So her hands moved again. The melody grew a little fuller, a little rounder. Not loud, not grand, not even something anyone would recognize, just a naturally flowing tune, shaped by a quiet connection between her heart and her hands. A customer sitting at a nearby table looked over, eyebrows lifting. "Is that her playing?" He whispered to someone across from him. They both tilted their heads, listening. From behind the counter, one of her coworkers peeked out. She had been preparing drinks, but the sound caught her attention. It wasn't anything spectacular yet, but it wasn't what she expected from someone who said she hadn't played in years. Back at the group's table, the regulars fell quieter. Their laughter softened. One leaned his elbow on the table, watching her with more focus than before. "She's not bad," he said under his breath. "Yeah," another replied, surprised. "I thought she was just going to play a few random notes." But she wasn't thinking of them at all. She wasn't thinking of the restaurant, or the dishes she still had to clear, or the drinks she needed to refill. Her world had narrowed down to the smooth surface of the keys and the growing melody slipping through her fingers. Her back straightened without her noticing. Her shoulders settled. Her hands moved more freely, shaping small phrases of music that connected seamlessly. It was still gentle. She wasn't ready to play anything bold, but even the quiet pieces of the tune carried something strong. The longer she played, the more her worries faded. She didn't change her expression, but something inside her was slowly waking up, as if she had been asleep for years and only now felt sunlight on her face. Eventually, she shifted into a pattern she remembered from long ago, a warm, flowing progression she used to play during moments when she wanted to calm her mind. She hadn't thought about it in ages, yet her fingers moved without hesitation, almost like the melody had been waiting for her. This time the sound reached deeper into the room. People began turning their heads more openly. A couple at the far end of the restaurant stopped talking altogether. A child nearby leaned closer, as though trying to understand why the music felt different from the songs usually played over the speakers. No one expected this from her. They had seen her bring water to tables, take orders, deliver plates, always polite, always quiet. They didn't know anything about her life outside the restaurant. She never shared personal stories. She kept to herself, worked hard, and avoided attention. But here she was, revealing something she never meant to share. She kept playing, unaware of how the room was slowly shifting around her. She wasn't performing, not in the way people usually perform. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't thinking about applause or recognition. She was simply following the thread of music she had long tucked away. As she played, her breathing steadied even more. The tension she had carried all Datha, pressure of work, the exhaustion, the worries she didn't speak about, seemed to soften. She felt as if she had opened a window inside herself, letting in air she desperately needed. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The room grew quieter as more people paid attention. Even though no one said anything loud, a quiet focus gathered in the air. It was the kind of silence that happens when people sense something real, unfolding something honest. Her hands moved naturally. It's not too fast, not too slow. The melody deepened gently. Carrying a calm emotion that spoke louder than words ever could, she didn't notice the kitchen door opening as one of the cooks leaned out. He wiped his hands on a towel and listened with a frown of surprise. He had never heard her play before. He didn't even know she knew how. Near the entrance, two people who had just walked in stopped before going to their table. They exchanged a look as if unsure whether they should speak and disturb the moment. But she saw none of it. She was still inside the music, wrapped in the sound, tracing memories she had kept buried for years. The piano wasn't perfect, but it responded to her in a way that felt gentle and familiar. She felt like she was home for a moment, a place she thought she had left behind forever, and then, almost without meaning to her fingers, moved into a slightly richer melody. It wasn't louder, but it was fuller. It carried emotion. It carried truth. That was the moment the entire room finally noticed her. Forks paused. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the people who usually ignored everything around them lifted their eyes. Something about the way she played, even in its simplicity, held a quiet power. She had no idea. She thought she was still just playing softly. Still mostly unnoticed, still safe inside her own small world. But the room was no longer watching her casually. They were listening, really listening, and the simple request they had made out of boredom was slowly turning into something none of them could have expected. The restaurant had grown so quiet that the sound of the piano felt like it was floating in the middle of the room, touching every table and every person without needing permission. The young waitress still had no idea how much attention she had drawn. She wasn't thinking about the customers, or her coworkers, or the busy world around her. She was focused only on the keys under her fingertips, each one guiding her gently into a deeper melody. Her hands moved with a confidence she didn't plan. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't something she practiced or prepared. It was the kind of music that came from memory, from emotion, from something inside her that had been silent for too long. The piano responded to her touch in a way that surprised even the people who had doubted the old instrument. It wasn't in perfect condition, but it carried her notes like it had been waiting for someone to bring it back to life. At one table, an older man stopped stirring his tea. His eyes narrowed slightly as he listened, trying to understand how a girl who seemed so quiet and ordinary could play with such feeling. His wife looked at him, then back at the waitress, and whispered, "Did you know she could do that?" He shook his head slowly. A pair of students near the window leaned forward, their earlier conversation forgotten. One quietly said, "That doesn't sound like someone who just knows the basics." The other nodded without speaking. Too focused on the music, the group of regulars who had asked her to play in the first place fell completely silent. The light jokes they had been making earlier disappeared from their faces. One of them rested both hands on the table, staring in disbelief. Another swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of guilt and admiration. They had asked for something simple, almost as a joke. And now they were witnessing something far greater than they could have guessed. In the kitchen doorway, a cook stood with his arms crossed, half smiling in surprise. He nudged another worker beside him, who shook her head in disbelief. "She's never said anything about this," she whispered. "Maybe she didn't want to," the cook replied quietly as the waitress played. The melody softened and then deepened, each phrase flowing into the next, as if she were telling a story without words. She wasn't thinking of impressing anyone. She was only following a feeling she had almost forgotten. It wasn't until her shoulders relaxed fully that she realized how long she had been holding herself tight all these months. The music moved through her like a gentle breath she didn't know she needed. The room around her, once filled with the natural noise of a busy evening, felt suspended in time. Even the clinking of dishes and the scraping of chairs had stopped. No one wanted to break the moment. Something in the way she played felt personal, and everyone knew it without having to speak. Her fingers slid into a melody she had not touched in years. It was something she used to play late at night when she needed to calm her mind to peace. She never played for anyone else. It wasn't famous. It wasn't complicated. But it carried the weight of her memories. As her hands moved, her thoughts drifted to the small room she grew up practicing in, the worn-out bench she used to sit on. In the late evenings when she tried to learn pieces she thought were too hard, she remembered the feeling of losing herself in music before her life changed. Before responsibilities and work and exhaustion took over, a soft ache formed in her chest. Not painful, just honest, across the room. A woman sitting alone felt her eyes grow warm. She didn't know the waitress personally, but something in the music reminded her of moments she kept hidden too. She covered her mouth gently, letting herself feel it. A man near the door blinked slowly, surprised that something so simple could touch him. He hadn't expected to hear music that carried more heart than the songs he listened to on his way to work. Slowly, one of the regulars leaned forward and whispered to the others, "We had no idea." His voice trailed off, because he didn't know how to finish the thought. They all felt it. The waitress wasn't just playing a nice tune. She was revealing a part of herself she had kept quiet for too long. Something deep and real was flowing out of her. Reaching people without her even trying, her fingers moved faster for a moment, then slowed again, shaping a melody that grew more expressive. Her touch was light but confident, gentle yet filled with emotion. It was the kind of playing that did not need dramatic volume or speed to feel powerful. Someone at a nearby table leaned back with a quiet breath. "She's amazing," he whispered. His friend nodded. "And she doesn't even know what she's doing to this room," another person added softly. "I didn't even know I liked piano music. But this?" They didn't finish, but their expressions said enough. Still, the waitress kept her eyes on the keys, unaware of the impact she was having. The world outside the piano faded away completely. She didn't see the customers watching her with wide eyes. She didn't see her coworkers standing silently in the doorway. She didn't see the manager near the bar, frozen in place, listening with a mixture of shock and admiration. All she felt was the music. Her breath moved in rhythm with the melody. Her shoulders rose and fell in quiet waves. Her fingers glided effortlessly, as if she had never taken a break from playing. The piano, though old and flawed, responded faithfully. Its voice carried across the room like a soft whisper mixed with a raw, truthful sound. Each note felt like it had weight, depth, and meaning. The people listening didn't need to know her story to feel what she was expressing as the music continued. The atmosphere in the restaurant transformed completely. People sat differently. They leaned in. They listened with full attention. A few kept their hands wrapped around warm cups but didn't drink. One child rested his chin on the table, eyes wide, fascinated by the sound. Even the smallest details felt different. The lights seemed warmer. The air seemed stiller. The world outside the windows felt distant. In the middle of this quiet transformation, the waitress reached a part of the melody that always brought her a sense of comfort. It was a gentle rise followed by a soft, hopeful fall, like a sigh that carried both sadness and relief. Her heart tightened for a moment as she played it. She hadn't realized how much she missed feeling connected to something. She hadn't realized how much she needed this moment. The customers didn't know the meaning behind the notes, but they could feel it. Music didn't need explanations to reach people. It simply reached. Someone whispered, "Where did she learn to play like that?" Another person answered quietly, "It sounds like she's been doing this her whole life." The regulars who had asked her to play looked down, suddenly feeling guilty for treating it like a joke. They hadn't meant to push her, but they realized now that a part of her had been waiting for a chance to breathe. The melody grew slightly stronger, then eased back into softness. Her fingers flowed as if guided by a gentle memory. She didn't force anything. She didn't rush. She simply played. Toward the center of the restaurant, a couple reached across the table and held hands. Something about the music made them think of their own story, the quiet struggles they rarely talked about. The piano reminded them that even gentle things could carry great strength. A few tables away, a man closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting himself feel the music. He didn't know why it moved him so deeply, but he didn't fight it. Meanwhile, the waitress played on, unaware that she was pulling the entire room into her world. Minutes passed, though no one knew how many. Time didn't feel the same anymore. The melody changed again this time, taking on a richer shape, as if her emotions had deepened without her realizing it. Her hands moved in patterns that felt natural, like water flowing around stones. Her heart softened. Her mind quieted. Her body relaxed into the rhythm. For the first time in years, she didn't feel rushed. She didn't feel invisible. She didn't feel worn down by the weight of everyday life. She felt present, and she felt alive. It wasn't until she reached the final gentle stretch of the melodia, part she had always loved, that she realized how deeply she had slipped into the music. She played the last group of notes softly, letting them fade into the room like a breath carried by warm air. For a moment after the sound faded, the entire restaurant stayed silent. It was a silence filled with awe, surprise, gratitude, and something else, something tender. Then someone finally whispered, barely loud enough to hear, "She's incredible." No one disagreed, and the waitress, still sitting at the piano with her hands resting gently on the keys, had no idea that her quiet, unplanned performance had just changed everything in that room. She did not know why her hands were shaking that morning. Maybe it was the strange energy in the room, or maybe it was the way everyone kept talking about the moment from the night before. Even though she was doing her best to stay calm, her mind kept replaying the scene over and over, the simple request, the brief hesitation, the way the whole restaurant had fallen silent as she placed her hands on the piano keys. She had come to work early, hoping the quiet would help settle her thoughts. Instead, the silence only made her remember the looks on everyone's faces. The moment she finished playing, people stared as if they had seen something unexpected, something far bigger than a small performance in a cozy place. She tried to shrug it off, but the memory followed her like a shadow while she wiped down tables. She kept wondering if she had crossed some line she didn't mean to cross. She had only wanted to keep the mood light. She hadn't expected her skill to stand out that much. She didn't want to draw attention. She only wanted to do her work and go home quietly. It's the same as every day. But the world, it seemed, had different plans for her now. As more staff began to arrive, they whispered to each other in soft voices. She pretended not to notice. She focused on folding napkins, arranging cutlery, and setting up the counter. But she could feel every glance, every half smile, every curious look. When her coworker approached her, she braced herself. He leaned closer and said in a low voice, woke up the next morning with a strange mix of nervous energy and quiet excitement. The feeling was different from the day before, as if something inside her had shifted overnight. She lay in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft sounds of the morning outside her window. For the first time in a long while, she felt as though something new was waiting for her, something she hadn't allowed herself to think about in years. She moved slowly through her morning routine, not because she was tired, but because her mind felt full. Every movement reminded her of the conversations from the day before, the kind words from coworkers, gentle encouragement from strangers, the unexpected support from her manager. And beneath all of that was the memory of the music she had played. It lingered in her mind like a warm echo. When she finally stepped outside, the air felt cooler than usual. She took a deep breath, letting it calm her as she walked toward the restaurant. She wasn't sure what she expected when she arrived, but she prepared herself for the curious glances she knew were coming. But instead of whispering, she found something else waiting for her. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere felt different. Light conversations filled the room, and soft music played from the speakers. A few coworkers waved at her with warm smiles, but no one crowded her or made her uncomfortable. The air felt lighter, calmer, She felt a little surprised but grateful. As she walked toward the back to clock in, her coworker stopped her gently. "The manager wants to talk to you." "Don't worry, it's nothing bad." She nodded and made her way to the office. Her heart beat a little faster, but she tried to stay calm. When she knocked on the door and stepped inside, the manager looked up with a kind expression, as if he had been expecting her. "Morning," he said. "I won't keep you long. I just wanted to show you something." He turned his computer screen toward her. It showed a simple post-a-short video someone had recorded the night she played. It wasn't very long, and it didn't even show her face clearly. It was just a close-up of her hands, moving across the piano keys. But the comments below it were endless. People wrote about how unexpected the performance was, how natural her touch was, how they wished they could hear more. Some asked who she was. Others said they wanted to visit the restaurant just to see she would play again. Her breath caught in her chest. She pulled her hands back slowly. I didn't know someone recorded it." The manager nodded. "Customers do that sometimes. I would have told you sooner, but I didn't want you to feel pressured. The video was small, but people really connected to it. I thought you should know." She stared at the screen, unsure how to react. A part of her felt afraid of attention, afraid of expectations. But another part of her felt something she hadn't felt in years, a spark of pride. The manager closed the screen gently. "I'm not telling you this to make you perform again. I thought you deserved to know that your talent reached people. You did something special, even if it wasn't planned." She nodded, still speechless. As she stepped out of the office, she felt different. The air around her felt charged, as if the world had shifted slightly. She took a deep breath and continued her work, trying to stay focused. Throughout the morning, she thought about the video. She wondered how many people had seen it, wondered what her life would look like if she kept playing, wondered if she was brave enough to let her talent live out in the open. When the lunchtime rush began, she found herself moving quickly between tables, taking orders, serving drinks, and greeting customers with her usual gentle smile. But even in the middle of the rush, her eyes drifted toward the piano more often than before. She tried to ignore it. She tried to focus on her tasks. But something inside her kept tugging at her attention. By the time the rush slowed down, she was tired but steady. She leaned against the counter to take a breath. That was when she heard a soft voice near her. It was a little boy, no more than 7 or 8, holding a small notebook in his hands. He stood close to her, shy but hopeful. "Are you the one who played the piano?" he asked. Her heart softened instantly. "Yes," she said gently. "I played a little." He held out his notebook. "Can you play again today?" "My dad showed me the video. He said you played like the people in concerts. I've never seen someone like that in real life." She looked down at him, her chest tightening with emotion. She didn't know how to answer. Before she could speak, the boy's father came over, apologizing softly. "I didn't mean for him to bother you," he said. "He's just excited. He's learning piano himself." She smiled and shook her head. "It's all right." Then she looked back at the boy. "Maybe not today," she said softly, "but maybe soon." The boy nodded, his smile bright and genuine. She watched him walk back to his table, feeling something warm bloom inside her. The rest of the day passed in a blur, but the boy's hopeful eyes stayed with her. They reminded her of something she had forgotten, a younger version of herself, sitting at a piano in a quiet room, dreaming of playing for people someday. When her shift ended, the sun was beginning to set. The warm light filled the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. She walked slowly to the piano, as if drawn by a gentle pull she couldn't resist. She sat on the bench, pressing one key softly. The note rang out clean and bright. She played another, then another. Soon, she found herself lost in a quiet melody, soft and thoughtful, almost like she was speaking through the keys. It wasn't meant for anyone else. It was just for her, an honest moment between her and the music. She had kept hidden for so long. She didn't know how long she played. Time became blurry. Her hands moved on their own, her heart guiding the sound. When she finally looked up, she realized she wasn't alone. A few coworkers stood nearby, watching quietly. They didn't speak. They didn't interrupt. They simply listened with soft expressions. One of them stepped forward and said gently, "You should let people hear this. It's too beautiful to keep to yourself." She felt her throat tighten, but she didn't look away. Later, as she walked home under the early evening sky, she felt a calm she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't sure what the future held. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to let her talent shine the way others wanted, but she knew she wasn't afraid anymore. Something had changed inside her. Something had awakened, and for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever this new path might bring. She woke up before sunrise the next day, long before her alarm. The faint light coming through her window painted the room in a soft gray, and for a moment she simply lay still, listening to the quiet. Her heart felt full, steady, and strangely calm, as if it already knew something important was waiting for her. She sat up slowly, rubbing her hands together. They still carried the memory of the keys from the night before, the way the melodies had flowed out of her without fear. She hadn't meant to play that long, hadn't meant to let anyone hear her, but something inside her had opened in a way she couldn't close again. It felt like the beginning of something as she got ready for work. She moved with a quiet determination. She didn't know what the day would bring, but she felt ready for it, ready to stop hiding, ready to stop shrinking herself, ready to step into something she had long avoided. When she stepped outside, the early morning air felt cool against her skin. She walked at a steady pace, watching the sky turn from gray to soft pink, each minute brightening the world a little more. It reminded her of the feeling she carried inside, slowly rising, slowly finding its shape. When she arrived at the restaurant, the manager was already there. He stood near the front counter, sorting papers. But when he saw her walk through the door, his whole expression changed. "Good morning," he said warmly. "You're early." She nodded. "Couldn't sleep?" He smiled knowingly. "A lot on your mind?" She looked toward the piano instinctively, then back at him. "Something like that." He chuckled softly. "Take your time. The day hasn't even started yet." She appreciated his calm, uncomplicated way of speaking. It eased the nervous flutter inside her. She went to the back to put away her things and get ready for the morning shift. As the hours passed, she moved through the restaurant as she always did, serving tables, checking on customers, refilling glasses, but her mind kept wandering to the piano. Every time she passed by it, she felt the pull grow stronger. Near midday, a familiar group walked in. She recognized them instantly, the same people who had been there the night she performed. They took a seat near the front, smiling at her in a friendly, familiar way. One of them waved her over. "We didn't know if you'd be here today," he said. "But we're glad to see you." She smiled politely. "Working as usual." He leaned forward slightly. "We were actually hoping." "Well, we were hoping you might play again. Only if you want to, of course." She didn't answer right away. She felt her heart picking up speed, but the fear that once held her back was no longer heavy. It was there, yes, but lighter, softer. "I'll think about it," she said gently. They nodded, not pushing the request any further, and she appreciated that more than they knew. A little later, the small boy from the day before came in with his father again. When he spotted her, his face lit up in a way that made her chest tighten. He hurried over, clutching his notebook like a precious treasure. "Did you think about it?" he asked shyly. "About playing again?" She crouched a little so she could look him in the eyes. His excitement was innocent, pure, not the kind of pressure that made her uncomfortable. "I did think about it," she said softly. "And," he whispered hopefully. She took a breath and let it out slowly. "I'm not sure when, but I think today might be the day." The boy gasped and ran back to his father, who smiled at her with gentle appreciation. Her hands trembled slightly as she stood up, but she wasn't scared, just overwhelmed by emotion she hadn't expected. The afternoon continued, but the quiet decision she had made lingered in her mind. She would play. Not because someone asked her, not because people expected it, but because she wanted to, She wanted to reclaim the part of her that she had kept hidden for too long. When the last rush of customers thinned out and the room settled into a calm hum, she walked slowly toward the piano. No one noticed at first, and she liked it that way. She sat on the bench, closed her eyes, and let her fingers rest on the keys. For a moment, she stayed still. Then she began to play. The first note drifted through the room like a soft breeze. The second followed, warm and clear. Together they painted a melody that felt both familiar and new. Her hands moved with confidence she hadn't felt in years. People began to turn their heads. The little boy stopped. Mid-sentence, the group near the front put their forks down. Co-workers peeked around corners. The manager stepped out from the back, wiping his hands on a towel, his expression softening as he listened. She didn't notice any of them, not really. Her eyes stayed closed, her breathing steady, her heart guiding every note. She played not to impress, but to speak. She let her story out through the music. All the things she had kept inside, the fear, hope, the memories, the quiet dreams she had abandoned. The melody rose gently at first, like a whispered confession, then swelled into something bold and full, something she didn't know she still carried. She didn't rush. She didn't hold back. She simply played. When the final note faded into silence, she opened her eyes slowly. The room felt different, as if the air itself had shifted. She looked up to find the entire restaurant still and quiet. Every person had stopped what they were doing. Every set of eyes was turned toward her. Then the applause began, soft at first, then louder, then warm and full, filling the space with a sound that wrapped around her like a gentle embrace. She blinked, overwhelmed. She wasn't used to such attention, but this time it didn't frighten her. It didn't make her want to run. Instead, it made her heart swell with a kind of gratitude she couldn't put into words. The little boy ran toward her, stopping just short of the piano. "That was amazing," he said breathlessly. "I want to play like that someday." She gave him a gentle smile. "You will," she said. "Just keep practicing. And don't be afraid to share what you can do." His father thanked her quietly, and she felt emotion rise again. But she swallowed it gently. The group from the first night approached her next. One of them said, "We knew you had something special, but this was incredible." She shook her head modestly. "I just played what I felt." "That's why it was beautiful," he replied. The manager walked over with a proud smile. "I think we should start planning something," he said. "Maybe a weekly evening where you play only if you want to." Of course. The old fear tried to rise again. But this time, she recognized a hand. Let it go. "I'd like that," she said softly. And she meant it as the day slowly came to an end. And customers began leaving with warm smiles and grateful words. She stayed by the piano for a moment, resting her fingers on the keys one last time. She wasn't the same person who had walked into work 2 nights ago. She wasn't hiding. Anymore, her talent wasn't a secret. Her voice wasn't silent. She had taken a step forward, not a loud step. Not a dramatic one, but a gentle, steady step toward the life she once dreamed of. When she finally walked home that evening, the world felt brighter. The air felt lighter. The path in front of her felt open. She didn't know exactly where it would lead. She didn't know how big this new beginning would become, but she knew something for certain. She was ready for it. And the music inside her, once tucked away in the quiet corners of her world, was finally free.